History is unfolding today. The Supreme Court's decision overturning Roe v. Wade has monumental impacts at the state level, certainly here in Georgia, where a restrictive abortion law has been upheld in the court, awaiting this moment. So we're going to step away from the national coverage to talk more about the impacts here in our state.
Yeah, we're expecting President Biden to address the nation at 12:30. We will take you back to network coverage for his remarks and more reaction from both sides.
What this means to women is such an insult. It's a slap in the face to women about using their own judgment to make their own decisions about their reproductive freedom. And again,
Take a live look outside the U.S. Supreme Court. Protests and celebrations growing in the 2 hours since the court overturned Roe v. Wade. It ends a nearly 50-year length of federally guaranteed access to abortion for women. The ruling today means that going forward, abortion rights will be determined by states unless Congress acts.
Yeah, this decision spurs so many questions now with Roe v. Wade no longer the official law of the land. Several states are ready to enact abortion bans of some sort.
Georgia included, as we mentioned, a new restrictive state law has been held up in court awaiting this day. The decision now is in the balance. Hope Ford explains what happens next.
For decades, abortion's been legal in America, but over time, several states, like Georgia, tried to restrict or pass total bans. Those were always challenged in courts because there was Roe. Now, everything is about to change.
We're just going to be in such a new zone that we haven't seen since 1973.
In 2019, Governor Brian Kemp signed what is known as the Heartbeat Bill, which bans abortions after 6 weeks, except in certain situations. The law was immediately challenged and is tied up in the court system. But now,
the courts will allow Georgia to enforce its law banning abortion at 6 weeks.
Georgia State Associate Professor of Law Anthony Michael Christ believes this could happen in a matter of days, and with it, lots of legal consequences.
Once cardiac cellular activity is detected, Georgia law will then deem that fetus a person. If a woman or a doctor performs an abortion that's not consistent with Georgia law, will that then actually be tantamount to murder? Because now we're dealing with a person.
And then there's the gray area.
If a woman has a pregnancy, that perhaps doesn't go well, and she miscarries, will that then open her up to an investigation for some kind of neglect or abuse, because now that is deemed a person under Georgia law.
The fight will not only take place in clinics, hospitals, and doctors' offices. It's also going to take place right here, under the Gold Dome.
Republicans and conservatives and Governor Kemp might very well want that battle in the sense that it can energize the base and it can drive voters out, which in a very tight and competitive election is important. However, it could also run the risk of alienating particularly suburban voters or suburban women, and that's a key demographic that Stacey Abrams and Brian Kemp are going to be fighting over.
Christ foresees the midterm elections accelerating this debate, not only for governor, but Senate and judicial races as well. And courtrooms will be another battleground.
There will be some challenges inevitably going forward.
Christ thinks some people could sue Georgia for a constitutional claim, since Georgia's constitution has a strong right to privacy protection. But with the Supreme Court overturning Roe, it's unclear what most lawsuits might look like.
We're in a completely new zone as a matter of constitutional law. But I think for the most part, the courts are more likely to brush those challenges away than they are to entertain them.
And why is that?
The Supreme Court, the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals here, the state court system is a fairly conservative series of systems and conservative courts. So you're not really going to have the most sympathetic audience in terms of challenging restrictive abortion law in Georgia.
The certainty now almost completely lies with abortion being banned in Georgia after 6 weeks. The uncertainty lies in everything else.
I think we're in for a pretty rough few weeks and months and years on this issue and related issues in terms of legislation and litigation that'll follow.
Hope Ford reporting for us. Georgia's law does not outright ban travel to other states where abortion remains legal. And Christ says if the law were changed to include that ban, it would open up more debates about the constitutional right of travel. Let's go now to Doug Richards live at the state capitol. Doug, as 11Alive's veteran political reporter, you have followed this issue at the state capitol for many years. What's your take on what could happen next here in the state?
Well, there has already been pressure on Governor Kemp to call a special session of the Georgia legislature this year during the election year to enact an even tighter abortion law than the one that was enacted in 2019, the famous heartbeat bill. When he ran against David Perdue in the primary, Perdue called on Kemp to immediately call a special session after the Alito draft of the Supreme Court decision was leaked. Kemp has resisted that, and in a statement today that Kemp released, he said that he called today's landmark ruling a historic victory for life, and that he looks forward to its impact on the legal proceeding surrounding Georgia's Life Act, which is the heartbeat bill. And then at the very end of the statement says, we will continue that important work in the days and months to come. What Kemp does not say is that he's going to call a special session. Part of the pressure on him to call a special session is to hedge the bet in the November election. If Democrat Stacey Abrams were to become governor and beat Kemp in November, any stricter abortion bill that would pass the Republican-led legislature would undoubtedly be vetoed by that governor. So having a special session kind of would preclude Abrams from vetoing a bill like that. But there are also reasons that Kemp would not call a special session. And the biggest reason for that is they may not have, probably don't have, the votes to actually pass a more restrictive bill. So folks are counting votes. They've actually been counting votes for weeks, but there will be, there's an existing legislature now that will retire at the end of this year. A new legislature will come in January, and nobody knows really what the makeup of that legislature will be and the extent to which they would be willing to pass a more conservative abortion law.
Doug, it's complicated as you're talking through this. I was reading a poll that 7 in 10, 70% of Georgians polled opposed reversing Roe versus Wade, but 49% opposed, a more restrictive ban. So Republicans know they're kind of walking a line here as we're approaching another election. Is that part of the intricacies of what's playing out and maybe thinking about what could happen next?
I mean, I think that what we see is that politicians pay the most attention to the polling data that's reflective of their own supporters. And the majority of the Republican Party, when polled, says, yes, I support stronger abortion restrictions. So I think what you're really going to be looking at is there were some Republicans in the legislature in 2019 when the heartbeat bill passed who opposed the heartbeat bill and did not vote for it. Similarly, there were a couple of Democrats who did vote for that bill. So, this is really going to be a numbers game in terms of how many legislators are willing to do it and the extent to which there is the political will among them to actually enact a law that's even more restrictive than the 2019 law, which is already quite restrictive in the pantheon of the 50 states. So it sounds like what they want to do is let this bill take law now that the Roe versus Wade impediment is out of the way and go on from there.
All right, appreciate your insight on that. Doug, thanks so much. Within just the last hour or so, we did hear from Stacey Abrams, who's calling and challenging Brian Kemp in the governor's race. Abrams addressing in a video her outrage over the court's decision today.
It is a fact that in Georgia, forced pregnancy is now the law of the state. The draconian abortion ban signed into law by the current governor in 2019 makes it a crime to seek an abortion after 6 weeks of pregnancy. Soon, Georgia women will lose their right to choose before most even know they're pregnant because of this governor's callous decision to put his politics above women's healthcare needs.
We are also hearing from Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock, who sent a statement reading in part, "I've always believed a patient's room is too small a space for a woman, her doctor, and the United States government. The Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade ends a core protection for women to make their own health care decisions, and it's a departure from our American ideals to recognize and protect basic rights." His Republican challenger, Herschel Walker, though, is applauding the court, saying this Supreme Court decision sends the issue of abortion back to the states where it belongs.
We're going to go back out live to D.C. outside of the U.S. Supreme Court. The crowd of people growing by the minute. Now, today's decision was widely expected after the court's draft opinion was leaked just weeks ago. I just left D.C. and there are already fences surrounding the building. Now we're seeing people from both sides outside of the court right now. Now, people who support the move saying this is the moment that they have been waiting years to see, but there are also many protesters out there arguing this will make it all that much harder for women to get proper medical care and can put their lives in danger. Let's go to Molly Oak as we continue our team coverage. She's joining us live in the studio. And Molly, you just finished speaking to an anti-abortion group.
Yeah, just got off a Zoom interview with a couple of different groups. First, Students for Life of America, which works to help establish pro-life groups for students with the goal of abolishing abortion. Students for Life says the battle isn't over, saying now it's up to the states to get the work done. They say everyone on their end is ecstatic about the ruling.
It's a huge step and there's a lot of work to be done. And so we're still going to be fighting like we normally do. You know, the only thing that's changed is now it's the states' rights, which is awesome.
I also just spoke with an emotional Ryan Baumberger with the Radiance Foundation, which was created in Atlanta. It's a pro-life group here. Here's his reaction.
I barely have a voice right now because I have literally been crying since the ruling came down. As someone who was conceived and raped but adopted in love, as someone who was an adoptive father, as someone with a wife who faced an unplanned pregnancy in her 20s but rejected the violence of abortion, this has so much significance to me. So yeah, I'm rejoicing.
He adds this is just one of many battles. Again, he's saying the work continues, but says this is huge, adding the Supreme Court did something supremely right today. Back to you all.